What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over how we can get these icons on our minimap based on what items and objects and NPCs are in the world around us. So you can see that I have the player icon that is moving around with the player. And then I also have these red crosshairs on the minimap, which are the icon I've assigned to the base enemy BP. And so I can put an icon on basically any object in the world, and then the minimap will pick up on it and put it in the proper location. Currently, we don't have the icon going to the correct location on the map. It's just tied to the center where the player is. But in today's episode, we're going to be adding the icon for every object in the world. In the next episode, we'll be moving them to the correct position in the world based on their actual real-world location. So to get started today, I believe we're on episode 42 of the first-person shooter tutorial series. If you want to get caught up, I'll link you to this icon in the top right corner right here, which is the playlist to the entire first-person shooter series. You can check out everything we've done to get to this point. Alternatively, if you are just interested in the minimap episodes, I'll link you to the first minimap episode right here, so you can get caught up on all the logic that I did to make the minimap in its current state. Okay. To begin today, what we really need to do is we need to make an actor component. An actor component is what we can use to get the icon associated with the object in the world. What we can do is attach this actor component to any actor in the scene, and they can then use that to take whatever data we've given it and pass it along to the minimap so the minimap can display it where it should be. Right now, like I said, we're not moving it to the corresponding location that it would be on the minimap because that's a lot of extra logic and that'll have its own episode. But we can gather all the data about the objects and then force the minimap to draw it on itself. Draw that icon on itself. So, like I said, we're going to need an actor component. And to get that actor component, we're going to make a new code class. So I'm going to go to add, and if you're in Unreal 4, you can just say add new C++ class. If you're in Unreal Engine 5, then usually you'll want to go to your base folder here where you have C++ folders and your blueprint folder. You can go into your C++ classes here and click add and click new C++ class. Once you have this, you can select your parent class. We're going to go to all classes and I'm going to find the actor component. It's right here, top on the list. But you can also search for it. And you want the standard actor component. Hit next, and then you name it whatever you want. You can pick public or private if you want. I actually don't typically use these. I just let it go to the default section. And then I type in my name. So I typed in map icon component, I believe is what it was. Yep. And then since I already have one, I can't create it, but you won't have this name, and so you can create the class here. I'm going to cancel instead of hitting create class since I already have it. Then once you get that working, these should pop up in Visual Studio. You'll get map_icon_component.h and map_icon_component.cpp. In the .h file, it's going to look pretty similar to what you see here. The only thing I've added a variable with a uProperty line and this enum class, but the rest of it should look pretty similar. If you've been following the series and you see that Visual Studio looks different for me, I did upgrade to Visual Studio 2022. However, it's really the same. There's nothing that you have to do differently from what I'm doing today. It just might look a little bit different and look a little bit weird. It takes a little while to get used to it, but I'm already used to it after a few days, so it's not a big deal. But if you saw that something was looking weird, that's probably what it is. In the map icon component.cpp, I haven't changed anything at all. So this is what you'll have in here, and we're not going to touch that today. We're only going to mess with the map icon component.h today. Okay, so the main thing we have to change when we get in here, there's one thing that we have to edit that matters more than anything else, and that is this U class line right here. So when you make this actor component in code, you're going to get this right here. you'll have this class group equals custom, meta equals blueprint, spawnable component. But if you don't add comma blueprintable within the parentheses here for the U class, you will not be able to select this as a component on a blueprint class. We're going to need to do that because we're going to add it to all of our blueprint characters and our blueprint objects. Alternatively, if you're doing everything through code, you can just add this actor component, this map icon component class, in your other code classes. But to follow today's episode, we're going to do that part in the blueprint. So make sure you make it blueprintable. And you'll be able to do that. Now, there's something else we're going to set up today that we don't really need to do today, but it's going to make our lives a lot easier in the future episodes if we do set it up while we're already in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And this is, I'm going to make an enum, and I will then use that to relate the icon type to a specific object. What I mean by that is, yes, we can assign the specific icon on each object, and every object can be different. Alternatively, we can use an enum to say let's say every enemy is going to have the same minimap icon. They're all going to have a red circle. Well, we can set the icon type to be enemy right here, and then we can gather the icon that we're going to use from there too. So we have two methods of setting icons. We can manually set every object's icon, or we can set them based on a type. So I'm going to set up this eIcon type enum right here. Make sure you put it above your U class, not in the U class. And we want it to be blueprint type so we can see it in the blueprints. I've called it enum class eIcon type. And I've made it an unsigned integer 8. Now I'm just going to give it all the values that I want. You could have a lot more than this. You could have less than this. You could copy this exactly. These are just some ones that I thought up, but you can think of many more, and you can put in as many as you'd like or as little as you like. So I have none as a default. I also have player for the player icon. I have enemy, boss, ally, so like a friendly NPC or friendly AI. We have general NPC, weapon, equipment, could be armor, could be ammo, whatever. Item, so like a potion or health. Location, if we want to have like name locations on a map. If we have a fast travel point, a main quest, and a side quest. Like I said, there's so many things that you can do with this, so add to it as you see fit, or take away if you don't need things. But there's a lot you can add here. I just added a bunch so I don't have to add to it every time when I go to add a new mechanic. I'll already have a lot of these enums in here. Now, like I said, we're not actually using this today, but setting it up while we're in here will make our lives a lot easier in future episodes. So I'd still recommend doing that. The other thing we need to add to this class today we are using, and that's our specific texture 2D that we're going to apply our image on so we know what can be displayed on the minimap when that object is within the bounds of the player, and they should be displayed on the minimap in the correct spot. So for example, like I was mentioning, the enemy would be a red circle. This variable is going to be filled out with that actual texture, sprite, whatever it is that you're using that can be applied to the minimap. So I have a U property where I can edit anywhere, blueprint, read, write, category, map. So this is just so I can access it in the blueprint. And it's a U textured 2D pointer. That's what the asterisk is. And I've called it icon because it's the icon for the map icon component. All right. Now with that, the code is actually done. We don't have to do almost anything in code today. Very simple on that because it's all going to be done within the minimap widget and the minimap behavior. And on each individual object, we want to add the icons too. So we can go back into the editor. And I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go to my blueprint section where I want to add my minimap data. So you could add it in the minimap advanced folder if you're following my folder structure, or wherever you have your other minimap stuff. I'm going to add a new class, and we want to add a blueprint class right here. We're going to go to all classes, and we're going to search for that new one that we added. So our code map icon component. This is what I want to make it out of, and I'm going to select that. It's going to create a new blueprint class, and I'm going to call it map icon component BP. So this is just a blueprint component that is tied to the code component we just made. You could just use the code one. You don't need a blueprint one. But if you make a blueprint one, you can do logic and behavior in here that you might not be able to do in code with the current system, such as grabbing the minimap and using it to do whatever. There's so many things we could do with it. You don't have to worry about that logic now. I'm going to show you that in a minute. But once you have a map icon component BP, then we can actually add these to our items. So again, we're not going to go through all the logic right now to add it, but this is what we're going to put on our characters and our items and our objects and our quests and whatever it may be. So just know that's what the purpose of making this blueprint component is. You'll see more of that in the near future. Now, let's start out with the minimap, because the minimap is the main thing, right? It's the one that is displaying the area around the player, the texture of the map, and it's going to be displaying certain things like the enemies and the icons and all this stuff. So let's start with the minimap. Let's go into the graph. And I'll show you what I've got now. So this is what I have from the previous episodes. Nothing has changed here. But I'm going to add a function called create icon for minimap, and we're going to use this to place things onto the minimap. Yes, we did the player icon just like this, where we did it arbitrarily. We set the owning player of the widget since the minimap was spawned by the player. And we went ahead and assigned the player's icon to the center of the minimap. Now we're worried about all the other icons on the minimap. So we can create a new function in here, and I called it create icon for minimap. And I've given it an input parameter of owning actor. So under inputs, if you press the plus, you can get a new variable. I've called it owning actor, and I've made it of type actor. And I just make it an object reference. So it can be any actor that owns this icon. This is because, you know, like I said, we could have an item, we could have health, we could have enemies, NPCs, allies, we could even have something like fast travel, spots, or potentially quests. So we have to have it pretty open. You could even probably give it a U object as opposed to an actor. But it's okay for now. As an actor, that'll cover all of our needs that we've got at the moment. And once you do this, we're going to have to create a specific icon every time we're in this function. But we don't have a widget for that yet. We actually have a player icon widget, but we don't want to use that one. We want to make a new one. So if I go into my widgets, we have a player icon widget, and it has the player icon image here that we want to use, spawn on the scene, and do all that good stuff with. Okay, but we want to have a separate icon widget, because the difference here is if we have the same widget, we have to manually put in this image, or we have to replace it every single time. But the player icon is going to be persistent. It's going to work, you know, the whole time the minimap's up, the player icon will be there. And so the map icons can spawn, they can be deleted. You know, say we have like a collectible tagged and it's got an icon. Once we pick it up, it's going to go away. So it's not quite the same as the player icon. So let's make a new widget. If you go add user interface, widget blueprint, then you can call it map icon widget if you want to match mine. But basically, this is just a different icon than the player. And since the one was done in Unreal 4 and this one's being done in Unreal 5, some stuff can be weird here, but there's nothing really strange about this. Basically what happened is this is what the widget will look like when you come into it. I added a canvas panel just for spacing and size reasons. I'm going to rename it so it doesn't have that 0 there. And so I have a canvas panel that I brought onto the widget like this. And I haven't modified anything with it. It's just there as a positional and scaling component. It's just there as a container. This is because I want to drag an image into it, and I want to put it in the center of this. So you can find image under common, and you can bring it on the canvas panel, or you can search the palette for image. Either way. Drag an image onto the canvas panel, give it a name called my map icon image. I made it a variable so I can see it in the blueprint and edit it. Now, you can see what I have for this map icon image here. So I have it anchored to the center, and then I know that this is a 24 by 24 image size, so I've offset the X and Y positions by 12 units. So it's directly in the center. If you see this line coming up, you can see that the lines intersect with all 4 center points. So at the center point of each face there. The line on the right is with the center. The line on the bottom is with the center. The line on the left is with the center. And the line up top is also with the center. Alternatively, if you don't want to do that, you can leave the anchor at the center like this. Have the positions at 0. And you can change the alignment to 0.5 for the X and the Y. And this is the same. Everything will be at the center. So it's up to you how you want to do it. Doesn't matter. They do the same thing. But that's how I came to that conclusion of what values I should put in. Like I said, I have my image size here. I don't assign an image because it's going to be assigned for each object. You could put in a default other than a white square if you'd like. But I'm not going to right now. And nothing else has to be changed. So that's our widget. That's our map icon, our base map icon. Okay. Now this is the widget that we're going to be spawning on the minimap. This is going to be for all of our other icons that aren't the player icon. You could also use it for the player icon, to be fair. But we don't have to, and since that icon is pretty unique, it's fine to keep them separate. I'm going to keep them separate. So if you go back to your minimap, we can now go ahead and spawn this. But you're going to notice something else here. That's the icon owner. We'll get to that in a second. So if you go ahead and create a widget, you can then select the class that you want, which is our map icon widget. Now it has an owning player, and I have an icon owner. The owning player is the player controller that owns it. Okay, but we have this icon owner. So how did I get that? If we go back to the map icon widget, we can go into the graph. And we don't have to look at what we've done in here just yet. But let's look at the variable list. So I have the map icon image, which just comes from this right here. That's the white square that we were just centering in this canvas panel. Since it's marked as a variable, it shows up in the list over here. Then I have a Minimap Reference, which will be used for things in the future, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I have this thing called icon owner. And the reason we have this is because the icon owner is what's going to have the icon, the actual texture that we want to display on the minimap. Think of it this way. We set up that enum where we could say like, oh, it's an enemy, so it'll be a red circle. Well, say we want every icon to actually be unique. Okay, we don't want the enemies to all be red circles. We want them to be determined by the class. So say we have 2 enemies. We have 2 types of zombies right now in our game. We have the zombie and the war zombie. Let's say we have zombie as one image and war zombie has another. If that's the case, then we can use the icon owner, which will be something like the base enemy BP, and then grab the icon, the texture that is associated with that class. But to be able to set this, okay, we need to be able to set it to the owning actor for the icon, whoever's calling create icon from minimap. Like I said, it has an owning actor passed into it, and so the owning actor then can become the icon owner on the map icon widget. So go ahead and make a new variable in here, plus variable, and I set it to an actor, object reference, same as we did on the Minimap widget. But once you compile and save, you'll have some settings you can edit down here in the details panel. You can click class defaults if you don't see them, and just click on the actual variable that you want to edit. We want to click instance editable, and it explains to you what it is in a comment. It says whether this variable is publicly editable on instances of this blueprint. Well, that instance that we're creating, this is something that we want to be able to edit. The other thing we want to be able to edit is we want to expose it on spawn, so when it is created, we can then also set the value. Okay, so check both of these boxes, compile, save it again. Go back into your Minimap widget, and you might see it, you might not. If you don't see it, you can either try and refresh the node by right-click, refresh nodes, or you might have to actually delete it and get it back. Either way, but once you get this node back, pick the widget again, and you should get the icon owner. Pass the owning actor into the icon owner. Now, once this widget is created, it has the owner that called create icon for Minimap. We haven't called this from anywhere yet, so don't worry. You haven't missed anything. But essentially, say like the base enemy BP, if that's the owner, well then we want the enemy, the base enemy BP, to be the owner of the map icon widget. Okay, I think that makes sense. Now we can go over the rest of the logic in here because this is all just for position. So we can put it wherever we want. And so we already have the minimap image and the minimap overlay from doing the player icon. So you can go ahead and copy these nodes from the event graph if you'd like, but I'll also show you how to get them right now. Basically, we have an overlay on our Minimap widget, and what that is this object that allows us to place content on top of each other. So if we get the overlay and type add child to overlay, we can then add something to it that we want to display. We want to display our new map icon widget, so we can plug that directly into the content. So we get this right here. Now, off the child that we just added, we have to set the alignment, and there's a few things we could do. We're going to want to set it at the right spot. So if we're facing everything, if we're basing everything off of the player's location, we're going to want it to be center. But as a demonstration, I can put the horizontal alignment to left and the vertical alignment to top. And if I play this, you'll see that the enemies, they spawn the icon up at the top left instead of with the center. So the enemy icons go up there on top of each other, and they're not where the player is. Okay, so that's what this is setting. So you can keep them wherever you want until we get them positioned right. I'll probably keep them left and top just so they're not over top of the players, just so you can see that. And there you go. The create icon for minimap function is complete. We need to take a step back and go to the map icon component BP. So the map icon component BP that we made, I never went over the event graph logic for. So for here, what we need to do is grab the minimap reference and call create icon for minimap for all the components, okay? If we call it on begin play, anything that has a map icon component BP will then call create icon for minimap, which means all the objects that are spawned will have an icon. As simple as that. And this is exactly what we want. So to accomplish this correctly, we need at least a minimap reference so we can call the create icon for minimap function. But I'm going to go one step further and actually avoid a race condition, which is where two things are racing to do the same thing or do something that the other needs first. And we're going to actually add a small timer here. That way we give it enough time to trigger this event after the object is spawned. This is also useful in case an object has to relocate once it spawns, so it spawns and it changes location. The icon on the minimap won't be teleporting all over the place or looking jittery. It'll just end up where the actual object was set to in location. Okay, so in map icon component BP, if we grab our event begin play, just like this, we can call a function called set timer by event. This is better than a delay in almost all cases, because what we can actually do with this is trigger another event once this timer is up, as opposed to putting things on hold and waiting for one or the other to complete. We can just set a timer that's independent of this object, and then we can trigger this event when we're ready. So we can call set timer by event, and you'll get this node here. Now, I haven't changed any of the values here or the looping. I have looping as false. I set the time to be 0.1, so that's actually 0.1 seconds. So after 0.1 seconds, since begin play is called, it will then trigger whatever this event is hooked up to. Okay, this is the event delegate. So I drag off of event and I type add custom event. Once I do that, it's going to link this part of these nodes together. So once this is triggered, it's going to call this event. You can call this whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I called it trigger create icon for Minimap. Okay. And the reason I did this is so that we can grab the Minimap reference properly. Since all these things are working off begin play right now and we don't have an actual flow set up, the minimap might be created after these objects are spawned, in which case the minimap will not exist and we can't get a proper reference to it to call the create icon for minimap function. So we need to make sure we're doing these things in the right order. Giving it even 0.1 seconds is actually huge in terms of spawning objects in the world, and so 0.1 seconds will always be after the minimap reference, unless there's any sort of delay in spawning that object as well, but we haven't set one up. There are several ways we can do it. I'm going the simplest way. It is the most crude, although we don't have an actual menu or spawning flow right now, so this method is fine. We will upgrade it in the future when we get that stuff sorted out. So I type in get all widgets of class, and then I search for the class that I want, which is the Minimap class. Top level only is fine if you have it separate from your HUD, but we want it to actually be false, not top level only, because the minimap actually gets applied to the character HUD. If I open up the character HUD, this is the actual minimap widget here. And so top level will not pick up on this minimap widget because the top level is the HUD. There is not a top level minimap. Okay, so make sure top level only is false, unchecked. Then off the found widgets, it's an array, so you type get. You can get a copy. And I just want to take the result of this and set it to a new variable. You can click promote to variable to do that. Or you can add a new variable and set it to your minimap widget type. I called it minimap ref. And then just set it to the result from the array. Now there should only ever be one, so getting index 0 is a safe operation. But if you have multiple ever, then you'll have to make sure you grab the right one. All right. Now, lastly, what we can do is call that new function we made in the minimap, which is create icon for minimap. To do this, we can drag off the minimap reference we have right here, or you can just get it, drag it here and get it, whatever you prefer. Drag off your minimap reference and call the function create icon for minimap. Remember, that is this function right here. Now, create icon for minimap takes in an owning actor, so we have to pass that. The map icon component BP is being put on any actors that are going to have a map icon. And so the owner of this component is going to be the owning actor that we pass into this function. In the example of the base enemy BP, we have a map icon component BP on here. And so the owner of this component is base enemy BP, which is the owner we want to display the icon for. So you can literally type get owner, and it's the owner of the actor component, as it says here, and you just return that into the owning actor. Now our map icon component BP is finished. With that done, we can now transfer back to the map icon widget, and we can set up this logic, because now we'll be able to have the icon owner in here. So when this object, this icon is spawned, we can actually set the brush to be the texture that we expect it to be. So since this is a widget and not an actor or some sort of actor component, we don't have begin play, but we have construct. So we want to find event construct. This is when the widget is first created or spawned. And we want to grab the icon owner, which is that variable that we set, remember, and you can get it. You could also check if it's valid first. Right now it's always going to be valid, but we will need to make sure that it is valid later on. But right now, grab it and type get component by class. Not the components, because that's an array, but just get component by class. In the component class section here, you search for the component that you actually want to find. And I searched for the map icon component, not the BP version. The BP version is fine, but if you search for the parent one, the code one, then any children of this will be found. So in case you ever want to add other children of map icon component in the future, this will find all of them. So I like to pick the code one. What this does is it takes this actor, this icon owner, which again, let's go off the base enemy. Okay, so our base enemy that we have here, which would be our zombie or our war zombie as a child of this. And this class has this map icon component BP. So we can simply find the component based on the type it is, because we only have one map icon component on this actor. And so if we get component by class, it's going to grab the first index that it finds. Again, there's only one. So this will return the proper map icon component. Once we have this, this is actually the map icon component that we made in the code. This guy right here. So it has an icon associated with it. So that icon is what the texture is going to be that we want to display on the minimap. So you drag off the get component by class, and you just type icon. You can get it, and you have it right here. Well, we have a map icon image on our map icon widget. That is this white square. And we want to set that to be the texture that we expect it to be. So we grab our map icon image. We call set brush from texture. And instead of just selecting the texture from the list, we pass in the icon we got from the component by class. Okay, that's how we get all this right here. There's one other thing we need to do. We need to get a minimap reference here. Technically, we don't need it for today's episode, but again, while we're in the event construct, we can go ahead and knock this out. So I'm going to use the same method that I used in the map icon component BP. I'm going to set timer by event. I'm going to pass it 0.05. So this loads before the map icon component BP, but it's not actually required that you do that here. And then I'm going to use the event to call the set minimap reference, which is going to get reference to the minimap widget, not top level only, get index 0, and set the minimap reference. This should be safe to grab the minimap reference immediately because this will only be spawned after the minimap. But it's good to do a check for it if we don't know right now, since we don't have a specific flow. In case we spawn any of these arbitrarily before, we do want to make sure that the minimap is able to be spawned prior. In case you don't have a reference to the minimap widget in here, you can do the same thing I showed you before, where you drag off of it and promote it to a variable, or make your new one, set the minimap reference to the result of this array, and you're good to go. All right, after this, we're almost done. We got one more thing to do. And what we have to do is assign the icons to each object. So we can compile and save that. Now on each object, we want to have a map icon for. We need to go into them, probably the base class, but again, you could be as specific as you want. You can go into each class, like my base enemy, and you can click add on the components list, and you can search for your map icon. Here, I'm going to pick my map icon component BP because I want everything the blueprint has. I don't just want the code class. Okay. Once you do that, you'll see it in the list. It'll be down here at the bottom. On map icon component BP, if you click on it, you can change variables about it. We don't need to actually do anything for the minimap reference here because that's set in the graph, so don't worry about that. But we do have an icon we can actually set. And so we can change this icon to be whatever we want. As we change it, this is what will represent the enemy on the minimap. So if I change it to, say I just change it to like this cracked ground image, now when I play the game, that's what's going to represent the enemy. You can see there's enemies here that would be displayed on the minimap, and so they are displayed by this image right here. So this could be your red square, your red circle, whatever. And so that is the entire flow that we need. Essentially, we have an actor component in code with a child blueprint class. These are attached to every single object in the game that we want icon to have. Once the actor is spawned, this component is spawned with it, which initiates the begin play, which then calls a function to create the icon and add it to the minimap. So the minimap spawns the icon, adds it to the overlay, sets it up in the proper position. That icon that gets created then changes its image to the image that is expected by the parent object, and then we set the reference in here for the future. And that is how we can get all that working to make these icons appear on the minimap for each and every object that we want. In the next episode, we'll be covering how we can move them to the proper spots on the minimap based on where the player is at and where they are in relation to the player. And that'll be a fun episode. But that's all I got for you today, guys. So if you enjoyed and I helped you learn about how you could add these minimap icons to your game and to your minimap widget, then please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do. I really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to all my YouTube membership and Patreon members, supporters, and subscribers. Thank you guys for everything you've done and for continuing to show me support. I really appreciate it, and I love working on these series. I'm glad you guys enjoy them as much as I do. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I'd be happy to help you. It's free. We'll get you sorted and moving along so you can keep working on your game. But anyway, guys, like I said, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.